So this is my indie film review of Orango for UK Film Review. And the film is written by Staniel Ferreira and Samuel K. Forrest, the latter of whom directs and the former of whom stars in the film. And it's a really interesting piece, this one, because technically you'd call it a mockumentary, but I don't think that term would quite explain the experience you're going to have when you watch Orango, because it's so convincing. It really does feel like you're watching a documentary. Every scene and every aspect of this movie just feels like it's real. But let me give you a little bit of insight into the story. So Ferreira plays a character called Enyi, and he travels back to Africa with his sister following the death of his mother. Enyi and his sister were moved to the US. They were refugees following a war in their childhood home, and this is the first time they've been back in 17 years. We initially meet Enyi with his girlfriend, and they're in Berlin, I believe, at the time, and that's what really sort of made me. It was the only part of the film really that did feel like, okay, this feels like we're watching something dramatic, something that's been staged. But then once he goes to Africa, which is not long after, everything from there just felt that it was real. It felt like he was having these honest interactions with real people. And the fact that a lot of these people are played by his family, you'll notice in the credits a lot of Ferreiras come up, is perhaps why it does feel like that. And it's saying it's based on a true story, and it's likely Ferreira's, Staniel Ferreira's. But even so, it's such an interesting mix and combination. It felt really original, and I loved that. So that kept me on my toes, as a film critic that watches a lot of movies. The film is actually, the bulk of it is about Enyi going back and reconnecting with his childhood home, finding answers to his identity and his roots, and trying to sort of maybe understand more about where he came from. There's also a significant portion dedicated to him wanting to speak to his father, understandably, and who is not a particularly likable character who we're presented with, and eventually he does have that interaction, that confrontation with his father. It's absolutely brilliantly filmed, that scene. I really loved it. The camera kind of holds back and it's sort of lingering from the sides, and at one point it's outside the room, like behind the wall, and you can hear the voices getting more and more kind of heated, and that was really powerful. It was that sort of really important coming of age moment for Enyi in terms of having that confrontation finally, because we hear stories, I won't spoil it, we hear stories about his father, about what he did and who he was, and it was an important scene. From there, Enyi then moves his search instead for his father to being more to his mother's family who live elsewhere, and he travels to this isolated island and hears stories about his grandfather, and it's a really sort of interesting dynamic going on there in terms of, now that Enyi has confronted his past, what's he going to do with his future? What does that look like? And how important are these people, this culture, Africa to him? And that was a really powerful amount of mixture of themes and identity going on there. It's brilliantly kind of brought together. The whole film just felt immersive throughout. Africa provides some amazing landscapes for the film to sort of unfold in, and Forrest knows when to hold back in terms of what Enyi's going through, and then maybe using the landscapes and sunsets, so actually gorgeous sunsets, to just give time for reflection for the audience. Sometimes with documentaries there's this compulsive need to just keep showing us things and helping us piece it together, whereas actually this is much more an emotional journey, and there is that dramatic element to it that we need time to process our character and what he's going through and what that means for him, and why he chooses to look where he looks, and unturned stones that he decides to lift up. And yeah, there's so much here for audiences to enjoy. There's so much that was done to a very high standard. And like I said, that mixture of genres, not knowing whether this was documentary or not, just gave it some originality for me. Yeah, I thought it was really brilliant. There's some great filming techniques being used. I love the use of these like whispering voices sometimes that are happening in the background, and it gave this sense of like ancestors speaking to Enu, being there, being part of him, part of this reconnection to his homeland. And that is always great when you see the film making techniques and styles complementing what the story's trying to do. And yeah, I think a lot of people are going to really enjoy that. The music as well is really authentic, and there's like vocal tracks being used to just elicit an emotional response from the viewer whilst we're considering what's going on for Enyi. And yeah, some really important historical aspects being explored as well. I don't want to ruin too much. I'm trying to sort of say what happens. You definitely should seek it out yourself. Let me see what I can find out for you very quickly. Can't quite see any current release information in terms of streaming platforms or anything like that, but there is a Facebook page you can follow. So it's a Orango feature film, all one word, at Facebook. And you'll be able to probably see the link when we post this on socials, so you'll be able to, we'll connect that as best we can. Myself and Brian will be reviewing this together on the podcast as well, so yeah, make sure you're following UK Film Review on the podcast, because I can't wait to chat to him about this. I think he's going to love it. And yeah, just really honoured to have been able to see a film like this, really different, really interesting. I hope it has fantastic success, and yeah, make sure you look out for it.